Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Playing at Learning Ask Me Anything session. So today we have with us Dr. George Matsumoto from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. So how this is going to work is, first of all, he's going to share with you guys a little bit about the ocean and ocean exploration. And then after that, we have a couple of teams who have submitted questions in advance. We're going to ask him a couple of those questions. And then after that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. So in the chat, you guys can ask him questions, and then he'll hopefully answer it to help inspire some of your innovation projects this season.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation to come and visit with all of you. And thank you for giving up some time on Saturday to learn a little bit more about the ocean. So I work at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, which is a separate organization to the Monterey Bay Aquarium. So we're partners with each other and we like to work together, but we're located in a different location and we have a different mission and different staff. So our web page is being shared with you right now. It's mbari.org. And on our web page, we put as much information as we can about the work that we do at the research institution. We have a staff of a little over 200 people, and our goal is to try to use technology to better explore and understand the ocean. We started up in 1987. I have a 6-minute video that I would love to play for you that tells you a little bit more about us. And then I'm just going to show you a couple of web pages where you could get more information. And then we'll open it up for questions and we'll see where we go from there. So the video I want to play for you is on our homepage. It's called Our Story. It's also on our YouTube channel. And so if you have access to YouTube and you could follow us on our YouTube channel, we have 260,000 subscribers and we'd like to have more. But we post a lot of information on a lot of videos on our YouTube channel, as you could expect. And a lot of them have a lot of different types of information. But this is the video I want to play for you. It has a narration, so sit back and enjoy.
Everything in the ocean has a story to tell. It's huge, it's dark, it's cold. How do you access this space? Simply by having a presence. You see things that no one has ever seen before. You discover animals that are completely new to science, or a phenomenon that no one knew was occurring.
You periodically come across something that is so magnificent that you didn't expect to see, and it's just breathtaking.
Tomorrow the winds will blow, they'll pump nutrients to the surface, and everything about the system will change. Where things are, who's there, how fast they're growing.
We're in a position to be able to share our discoveries and our love of the ocean in ways that were never possible before.
There are no departments of chemistry or biology or engineering for that matter. We are all mixed together, and that's very unique.
Each side can inspire the other to ask challenging questions, come up with innovative answers.
A scientist will know what they're looking for, but the engineer can illustrate the possibilities beyond what the scientist first imagined.
And that's the trick, is understanding those differences in language and how we put them together in order to realize the kind of device that we're trying to build. We marry that science and engineering partnership with our marine operations personnel. And the only way to make all that work is to have a group of dedicated professionals to operate the vessels, to operate the equipment, to recover it. It's really that three-legged stool, science, engineering, operations, that allow us to do the things that we do and work as a team. Oceanography is a contact sport. We have to not only immerse ourselves in that realm, but we also have to acquire material. We have to manipulate that material.
MBARI's here in Moss Landing because of the access to deep water that we can get to so quickly.
If we were to drain Monterey Bay, you would see a canyon equivalent size to the Grand Canyon.
So we get these deep, cold, nutrient-rich waters fertilizing the upper ocean. It gives us an incredible opportunity to understand that connection of the deep sea to our coastlines where most of our fisheries come from.
One of MBARI's guiding principles is to make our measurements in the natural habitat rather than hauling the animals out and studying them in our world.
It's important that discoveries we make have an impact and tackle problems like climate change, like ocean acidification, and exporting that knowledge, making it available to the whole world. One of the really unique things about MBARI is our partnership with the Monterey Bay Aquarium. We had the opportunity to bring fundamental science and technology, marry that with their amazing global reach that communicates important issues about the ocean to the public, to policymakers. We really want to be transformational as opposed to just incremental in the work we do.
Oceanography is in the middle of a robot revolution with platforms that can take us to places we couldn't be, at times we couldn't be there. It's really a fundamental shift in how we think about things.
We have new ways of assessing fisheries, better ways of managing precious resources. We're sitting on this mountain of highly curated information here that was being mined to extract quantitative information like who's there, how many, how do they relate to changes in the environment, so forth.
And that gives us an incredible ability to think about these things at a grand scale and to make those connections that are really challenging, but that's what we need to do.
Just by studying anything in the ocean, you are studying climate change.
The ocean is absorbing a tremendous amount of carbon dioxide and absorbing a lot of the heat that's being produced. The question is, what does that mean for the ocean? What does it mean for the life that depends on the ocean, and what are the consequences in the future?
Changes at one step have implications through the entire ocean food web and atoms to ecosystems and all the way up to humans on Earth.
I don't know anywhere in the world where you have this confluence of the place of Monterey Bay, the opportunity of science engineering partnership, and the charge to do something that's high risk, long duration, unknown outcomes, and at the end of that, the expectation that you will just share it with everyone. You will essentially give it away.
Every time we answer a question, we have 20 new ones. Often we think we know what's happening, and then the biology surprises us.
It's really amazing how much MBARI has been able to be the ambassador for the open ocean and the deep sea.
That's why MBARI is here. We're supposed to do things that might not be possible by any other approach. I don't imagine there's another place quite like it.
So that's a quick overview of our organization and what we do. We have a lot more resources on our website, including a look at the day, what a day in the office might look like for somebody who works at MBARI from a variety of different roles, not just as a biologist, but also as an engineer or a machinist or almost anything we do. We have a whole suite of videos about navigating STEM careers. And then we have a lot of different types of work that might be useful to parents and students for things you could do at home. And this is something we set up during COVID, and the resources are still valid. And so we've left up the web page just in case somebody is interested in looking at some of these. And then the last thing I want to talk a little bit about is the Adopt a Float program, which some of you have already adopted floats, and FLL team is certainly welcome to adopt a float. These are autonomous robotic floats that we launch all over the world. So far, we've deployed almost 200 of them, and they stay out there for 5 years. They measure the water from 2,000 meters to the surface every 10 days, and they send back biogeochemical information. And biogeochemical information is going to be temperature, salinity, pH, chlorophyll measurements, nitrate measurements, all the things you need to live in the ocean. And this is giving us a much better look at what's going on in the ocean and what's changing in the ocean. And by adopting a float, your group can name a float, and then you get to use it and follow that float for its lifespan. You could follow anybody else's float as well, and you're welcome to do that. And the procedure to adopt a float is pretty simple. It's just, you can look up adopt a float and go BGC, which is a Global Ocean Biogeochemistry Array, and you learn a little bit more about the program and then apply. And it's really easy to apply. All you have to do is fill in a web page online, and there's no charge, and there's no requirement for you to use the data. But if you want to use the data, there's lots of information about how to use the data. And one of the fun things that we've done recently is, and relevant to what all of you are probably most interested in, is we've been generating lesson plans about how to use the data coming back from the floats. And one of those is with Lego. And so here's a whole lesson plan about using Lego to learn more about floats and the data associated with the floats, including how to create, not only how to create a Lego float, but also how to build your own instructions. And all of us are used to seeing instructions, but how many of you have actually built your own instructions step by step so that it looks like this? And all the instructions for doing that are online. So if you're interested, that's something else you could take a look at. And my sons were involved with First Lego League back when they were students in middle school. They're no longer in middle school. They're no longer in school because they're much older now. So I love the program, and I'm very excited that FLL has taken a look at the ocean this year. And I'm happy to take any questions you might have about the ocean or anything else. So have at it.
All right, that was amazing. It's always great to know that we have a supporter out there, and I'm really happy to see all of the work that the Research Institute is doing. So first of all, I'm going to get started by asking you a couple of questions that were submitted to us before this presentation. And so the first question that we have is, how does it feel to go into a submarine? And then how do you see where you're going once you're in a submarine?
Great question. So the Research Institute, we use robots. And so nobody actually goes into the sub. It's all a robotic vehicle we send down and we control. And we control using like a joystick, like you would like with a video game. And we do that from on board the ship. I have been fortunate enough to go in a human-occupied submersible, though, and we went down to 1,000 meters, and it was amazing. Truly some of the best experiences I've ever had in my life, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. You only see out of a little tiny window because that's the weak spot in a submersible. That's where water could leak in. So they make that window as small as possible. And that's one of the reasons why we like to use robots, is because you could see a lot more with a robot. And so, but I would still love to go down in a human-occupied sub. The hard part for any of you interested in going down in a human-occupied submersible is the fact that most dives last about 12 hours, and you have to sit in a seat the whole time. So think about what you do for 12 hours during the day normally, and you have to do all of that while sitting in a chair with a pilot sitting right next to you.
Wow.
So there are some challenges.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the second question that we have is, which problems do you face when you're exploring the ocean? And that could apply to you, that could apply to other researchers at your institute, or just in general.
That's a great question. So what problems do we face? I would say the biggest problem we face is that there's so much we don't know. We don't really know where to start. As that video talked about, pretty much every time we go in the water, we learn something new. And so we come up with new questions all the time, and that's challenging. It just means we're always always looking for something and trying to answer questions and trying to deal with all the questions that come up while we're answering the questions.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to do sort of a follow-up to that. What type of technology do you think could be developed to make that a little bit easier? If there even is a type of technology that could.
That's a really good question. So what kind of technology could we use? So one of the new technologies that we're starting to use these days is artificial intelligence. So we're starting to play around a little bit with using machine learning and computers to get us to learn more about the environment that we're living in. And that's because we could send vehicles down and we could record, and that's easy, but trying to learn what's on the video is what takes a long time. So if we could train the computers to do that, then we save ourselves a lot of time.
All right, so everybody listening to this, you guys should maybe think about doing that for your innovation project or a simplified version, and who knows, maybe that'll be your billion-dollar startup idea in the future. Okay, so the next question that was submitted is, what kind of radar do you use to make sure you don't bump into other objects in the ocean? And have you ever crashed into a whale?
Both great questions. So we do use sonar, which is essentially just sound, to find out, to make sure we know where we're going and that we don't run into things. Everywhere we go with the robot, we always send a vehicle to map first. So it's like if you're driving in a car and you want to go somewhere and you've never been there before, you look at a map so you know how to get there. And ocean exploration is the same. We don't like to go places that we don't have a map for because we don't know what we're going to run into. So we always map first and then figure out where we're going to go. The second part of the question is, have we ever run into a whale? And the answer is no. But the flip side is we think a whale ran into us. So one of our concerns with our robots has always been that our robots make too much noise. They shine very bright lights because it's dark down there. They make noise because they use hydraulics and hydraulic engines, and they're really slow. So we thought maybe if we turn everything off and we're really quiet for an hour, and then we turn the lights back on, we could see what comes when we're quiet. And so we tried that once in the early 1990s, and 15 minutes into our experiment, something hit us. Something big hit us and bent some of our titanium frame. So we think it was a whale who didn't see us because we weren't making any noise and we weren't shining any lights, and they're not expecting to run into anything in the middle of the water. So we don't do that anymore because we want everybody to know where we are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, our next question is kind of similar. So how do biologists track fish?
How do biologists track fish? Well, one of the ways we track fish is by putting tags on them. And so we can't actually put tags on them and track them that way. It's hard because fish are really good at hiding. And especially when they start to school, they become difficult to identify because you can't keep track of a single fish when they're in a school. That's why fish school, so they could hide. So we're getting better though. And again, computers are helping because machine learning, it's harder to fool a computer. It's much easier to fool a human. Our eyes are not as good.
Mm-hmm. And so with that being said, are there any patterns in fish populations? And that's kind of a broad question.
Great question. Are there any patterns in fish populations? There are some broad patterns that we're starting to see, mostly related to climate change, where we're starting to get some fish that used to live in areas no longer living there because the water is getting too warm. And that's getting counterbalanced by the fact that other fish are moving in. Fish that like warm waters are now moving in because the water now is comfortable for them. And whereas before, maybe it was too cold for them. So we are starting to see some changes over time as the water and the ocean change.
All right. And so then what is your biggest worry regarding the ocean? And I'm kind of wondering if that ties back to climate change.
It does. It does tie back to climate change. My biggest worry about the ocean is that we don't know very much about the ocean. So Monterey Bay is the best studied body of water anywhere in the world. And that's because MBARI has been here studying Monterey Bay for the last 37 years. With that, we think we've explored about 5% of Monterey Bay. So just think about that. The best studied body of water, we don't know anything about. And then think about the entire rest of the world ocean. And so anything we do and are doing to the ocean might cause changes that we don't even see because we're not there. And so for me, the biggest worry is that we're taking the ocean for granted, right? Pollution, we throw things in the ocean because we think because we're diluting it, everything's going to be okay. But we don't know that for sure.
Mm-hmm. And so then our next question is, how do the MBARI ROVs withstand the high pressure in the twilight zone?
Great question. So as you get deeper in the ocean, the pressure increases. It increases by 1 atmosphere, or almost 15 pounds per square inch, every 10 meters you go down. The Monterey Submarine Canyon is 4,000 meters. That's 400 atmospheres. 400 times 15 pounds per square inch. That's how much pressure there is on our remotely operated vehicles. And so we have to build containers that can withstand that pressure if we want to keep the water out. A lot of our vehicle is open to the ocean. Water just flows in and out. But all the electronics and the camera systems, those all have to be kept sealed and safe from the pressure. So our pressurized containers are built out of titanium.
Wow. Okay, so those were all of the questions that this team had submitted beforehand. So now I'm actually going to turn it over to the questions that our audience is submitting at the current moment. So for everybody who's listening, which we have over 200 of you, that's amazing. We have about 35 minutes left. So if you guys want to go to the question tab, people have already been submitting questions, but I'm going to try to get through as many of them as possible before we run out of time. And I'm going to attempt to ask them in the order that they've been submitted, but I apologize if I end up not asking them in order. All right, so the first question that we have from the audience is, which has the most impact on the ocean? Deep sea mining, overfishing, climate change, ocean acidification, deep sea exploration, or microplastic pollution?
Wow, that's a tough question. It's a tough question only because we don't know what the impact is that we're having. So deep sea mining has not really started yet. So at this point, it's not having much of an impact, as opposed to microplastics and ocean acidification and climate change, which are all ongoing. And they are having an impact, but we don't know what that impact is going to have. Exploration has very little impact, really, aside from the carbon dioxide emissions that happen when you take a ship out to the ocean. But we need that because we need to explore so we can find out what's going on. And we need that information, what it looked like before and what it looks like now. So we're learning, and there's lots of room left for new students and new researchers to come and join us to try to figure out what's going on in the ocean.
Absolutely. Okay, the next question is, what are the impacts of fishing on marine life and ocean ecosystems?
Another good question. So fishing, it all depends how it's being done. So an individual like you going out and fishing with a parent or somebody else, negligible, very little impact. The biggest impact we have with fishing are the factory ships, the big fishers who are going out with massive nets and just netting up everything that they catch in their nets and processing all of that for food. Those are the fishing operations that have more impact. In some of the smaller island nations, they are fishing, because they've fished out all of the large fish, they're now using things like poison and dynamite to stun smaller fish to come up to the surface where they could use nets just to scoop them up. So there are lots of different types of fishing practices, some of which have very little to no impact, and some of which have a very large impact.
All right, so our next question is, how does human pollution impact the ocean?
Another good question. How does human pollution impact the ocean? Well, human pollution there are two main different types. One is what we call organic pollution. That's things coming from our body, say, or from our cars that are leaking oil onto the streets. And all of that washes into the ocean eventually, no matter where you live, because if it goes in the storm drain, it's going to go into the ocean. That organic pollution has the potential to go through the food chain because it's organic. Things eat it, things ingest it, or things absorb it. So those all have potential to damage the ecosystem. The inorganic pollution is going to be things like plastics, things that don't have any carbon in them. That's why we call them inorganic, and theoretically should not be eaten. But microplastics do get eaten, and we don't really know what the impact of that is going to be. Our thought is that it's not a good thing because we shouldn't be eating plastic, and the fish shouldn't be eating plastic, but the fish do and other organisms do, and then we ingest plastic when we eat things from the ocean. So we know pollution in the ocean is having an impact, but again, we can't tell how much.
Okay. All right, our next question, what are ways that people are trying to help revive the oceans?
Oh, I love this question. So thank you for that. Action-oriented items. Don't litter.